Welcome to the May 4th, 2021 meeting of the Santa Barbara City Council. Call this meeting to order. Start with our Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please call the roll, Mr. Clerk.
Yes, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Alejandra Gutierrez.
Here.
Councilmember Harmon.
Here.
Councilmember Sneddon.
Here.
Councilmember Friedman.
Here.
Councilmember Jordan.
Here. Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Oscar Gutierrez.
Present.
Mayor Maria.
Here. Thank you very much. We have a ceremonial item today. Mr. Clerk, please read that into the record.
Yes, Madam Mayor. Item 1, Employee Recognition Service Award Pins.
Mr. Casey, welcome.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and council members. As you know, each month I like to come to council and recognize employees for achieving certain milestones in their service to the city. So today I'd like to read some names into the record in recognition for their work. With 5 years of service to the city, Trace Martin, Laboratory Supervisor, Public Works Department. Sandra Vose, Senior Library Technician, Library Department. And Deanna Zackerson, Airport Business Development Manager, Airport Department. With 10 years of service to the city, Carson Woolert, Supervising Engineer, Public Works Department. Michael McNeil, Electronics Communications Supervisor, Public Works Department. And Madeline Wood, Water Conservation Supervisor, Public Works Department. With 15 years of service to the city, Graciela Reynoso, Senior Human Resources Analyst, Human Resources Department. Liz Stotts, Senior Community Development Program Specialist, Community Development Department. Justin Berman, Parking Coordinator, Public Works Department. And Johnny Salas, Assistant Parking Coordinator, Public Works Department. With 20 years of service to the city, Brian Jensen, Police Lieutenant, Police Department. Christina Ortega, Police Officer, Police Department. And Kevin Ryan, Police Officer, Police Department. And with 30 years of service with the city, Annalisa Hoods, Police Services Coordinator, Police Department, and Paul Rodriguez, Senior Airport Maintenance Worker, Airport Department. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thanks, Mr. Casey. Congratulations for all those years of service, and we're grateful for you working for the city, working hard for the city all this time. Another employee recognition today is Councilmember Sneddon's birthday. We'll say happy birthday to her later. Mr. Casey, changes to the agenda. I think we might have one.
Yes, Madam Mayor, we just noticed that on item 2, which is dealing with the electric charging installation, station installations in the Ortega or Lot 10 garage, we had an oversight of not attaching the contract to the council agenda report, and that is our standard procedure for doing so. So for transparency's sake, we'd like to just pull the item for today. We'll bring it back next week with the contract attached to the council agenda report. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Thanks for that. We'll go to public comment. This is the public's opportunity to speak to us on items that are not on our official agenda. So I invite the council members onto the screen, and I'll ask Mr. Stowe if people are raising their hands to speak in open public comment.
Yes, Madam Mayor. At this time, we have one member of the public with their hand raised, Anna Marie Gott. And Anna Marie Gott, I will unmute you and you may begin your comment, please.
Ms. Gott, we can't hear you.
I think we may have be awaiting on a phone connection. So we'll move on. We can move on to the next speaker, and that would be Gary Shapiro. Gary Shapiro, you have been unmuted, and you may unmute yourself and can you comment, please?
Yes, a confluence of circumstances have made it practically imperative to do something permanent about the Oak Park stage. because of the pandemic, people are reluctant to go indoors for exercise and dancing, etc. And the so-called solutions so far have been temporary. And if you look at it now, I encourage you to go look at the Oak Park stage. And we need a solution for safe dancing and exercising. Right now, I don't think it's safe. 2 words I'd like to mention: hardy plank. It's a type of decking material that would probably last longer than wood, although I don't know how well it will stand up to skateboarding, which of course is not allowed there, but it certainly happens. And I'm not sure what else to say. Maybe there's some COVID-19 money that could be used, because this is definitely related to the pandemic, because people need to be or are encouraged to exercise outdoors rather than indoors. And my own interest is as a dancer. I do folk dancing and English country dancing and contra dancing. And the contra dancing, as you might know, is co-sponsored by the city of Santa Barbara. Thank you.
Thank you. Did we get Ms. Gott back?
Yes, Madam Mayor. Anna Marie Gott, you have been unmuted and you may begin your comment, please.
Council members, this year the minimum wage in the city is $13 or $14 an hour, depending upon the size of the company. No one working for this wage or even near it can afford to live in the city of Santa Barbara unless they live in substandard housing, overcrowded conditions, are dependent on both governmental or non-governmental assistance to subsist, or have multiple jobs to make ends meet. Did you know that at minimum wage, someone would need to work 90 hours a week to afford a place to live in the city? Frankly, the city is dependent upon revenue it receives from service, hospitality, and tourism industries in the form of sales and transient occupancy tax. These industries actually have aggressively pushed the idea that increasing wages will dampen growth and taxes. However, all the economic literature points to the opposite occurring. If you increase wages, you are going to see an increase in discretionary spending. Someone at the Ordinance Committee said it would take at least a year to go ahead and do a study regarding a living wage. That's simply not true. The city will not and does not need to reinvent the wheel. Numerous cities in California, including ones that have a disproportionate amount of tourism, hospitality, and service-oriented jobs in their economy, actually have shown that we can increase wages without having businesses go out of business. A living wage actually in the city of Santa Barbara could be passed in 90 days if there is the political will to do so. I just want to remind you that a living wage is a poverty wage, and this council and all the others before it actually endorse a poverty wage. They also endorse generational poverty. Here's some facts. Raising the minimum wage benefits small businesses and the economy at large. While critics say that it's actually going to hurt businesses, it doesn't. They actually show that this isn't true. Economic literature has found that increasing in workers' productivity, reductions in turnover, and aggregate increases in consumer spending actually result from increasing the minimum wage to a livable wage. 1 in 4 children in the county live in poverty. Children born into poverty are more likely to have children born into poverty. This is called generational poverty. Children born in poverty are 3 times more likely to drop out of school.
Thanks so
And
much.
the minimum wage increases would make the economy more equitable and drive growth. Thank you.
We appreciate your comments. Thank you. Mr. Howe, did anyone else raise their hand?
Yes, Madam Mayor, we have one additional member of the public who would like to speak, Mikal Lynch. And Mikal Lynch, I have unmuted you and you may begin your comment, please.
Hi, this is Michael Lynch. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. I want to speak to the same issue that Gary Shapiro spoke to about the Oak Park dance stage. It's not a question of not knowing how to repair the stage. The city's own staff that works under the Parks and Rec Department, they know things that can be done effectively to significantly improve the wear of that stage. But the Parks and Rec, every year, this has been going on for years now, they don't have the funding to do what's necessary, so they do the absolutely bare minimum, which doesn't work. So not only are they not getting it done effectively, it'll last for about a month. Other than that, we don't have a very functional stage. Now, we've managed to deal with that up until now, but now what we've seen with COVID is that we really need to keep people outside more than inside for recreation. We've seen that that makes a big difference. So for health and safety reasons, we really need to take care of this floor so that the people who are using it now continue to use it and don't go back inside. COVID is not expected to go away even this year. I don't know if you saw today's report. The prediction is that the United States is not going to reach what they call herd immunity. This is not going away. We need the floor to continue. But Parks and Rec is not going to have the budget. I'm really hoping that the city, aside from just the Parks and Rec department, can come up with other funding for it. In addition, I want to suggest to you maybe reaching out to the county, because this is not a city problem. This is something that is used by all members of the county. We get people up from Carpinteria. We get people coming down from Santa Maria occasionally. Not too often, but certainly Goleta. So please come up with some funding for it. We really need that to continue for the health of our city if we want to stop COVID from continuing. And in the future, we've also virtually eliminated the flu season this year. We didn't, and that's not because of flu shots. It's because we did do what was healthy for us. We need the park. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Lynch. Any other speakers for open public comment?
No, Madam Mayor, no other speakers at this time.
Okay, we'll close public comment with thanks to everyone who participated. Consent calendar minus item 2. Mr. Stowe, you have items to read, I assume.
Yes, Madam Mayor. 1 item to read, item 3. Subject, set a date for public hearing regarding renewal of levy for fiscal year 2022 for the Wildland Fire Suppression Assessment District. Recommendation, that council adopt by reading of title only a resolution of the council of the city of Santa Barbara declaring its intention to continue the wildland fire suppression assessment within the foothill and extreme foothill zones, declaring the work to be more than general or ordinary benefit, and describing the district to be assessed to pay the costs and expenses thereof. Preliminarily approving the updated engineer's report, stating intention to continue assessments for the fiscal year 2022, and establishing a time of 2 p.m. on Tuesday, June 8th, 2021, in the City Council chambers for a public hearing on the wildland fire suppression assessment.
Thank you. Would any council members like to pull? Ms. Sneddon, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I believe I have to pull that item to recuse myself because I live in the assessment district.
Okay, thank you. Is there any public comment on item number 3? Mr. Kalan, you too? Mr. Kalan, if you had something to say, No. Okay. Mr. Stout, is anyone raising their hand for item number 3?
No, Madam Mayor, no public comment at this time.
Let's go ahead and vote on that one then. Do I have a motion to move item 3 forward? Mr. Jordan?
Mayor, I'll move item 3.
Second it.
And a second from Friedman. Any other discussion? Let's take a roll call vote on 3. The Wildland Fire Suppression Assessment District item.
Yes, Madam Mayor. There is a motion for consent calendar item 3 by Councilmember Jordan and seconded by Councilmember Friedman. Councilmember Alejandro Gutierrez,
Yes.
Councilmember Harmon,
Yes.
Councilmember Sneddon is recused. Councilmember Friedman,
Yes.
Councilmember Jordan,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Oscar Gutierrez,
Aye.
Mayor Murillo.
Okay, that passes 6-0 with Sneddon recused. Mr. Jordan, did you want to pull an item?
Nope, but I'll move the rest of the consent items minus 2 and 3.
Pending a public comment. So,
Okay.
and a second from Mr. Friedman? Okay, thanks. Mr. Stowe, is anyone raising their hands for the rest of the consent calendar items? That would be,
Madam Mayor, at this time, there are no hands raised to speak on the consent items.
thank you. We'll open and close public comment on consent calendar. And Mr. Stowe, if you would take a roll call vote, please.
Yes, Madam Mayor, there is a motion for the consent calendar by Councilmember Jordan. The consent calendar excluding items 2 and 3 by Councilmember Jordan and seconded by Councilmember Friedman. Councilmember Harmon,
Yes.
Councilmember Sneddon,
Yes.
Councilmember Friedman,
Yes.
Councilmember Jordan,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Oscar Gutierrez,
Aye.
Councilmember Alejandro Gutierrez,
Yes.
Mayor Murillo.
Aye. Okay, that was unanimous. We'll move on from the consent calendar. Mr. Friedman, a report from the Finance Committee.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Today, in regards to the 2022 and 2023 budget, we heard the proposed fee changes for parks and libraries, and it was just a consideration, so no action was taken, and those will be coming to the full council as part of the budget deliberations later this month.
Thank you. The Ordinance Committee also met, but they took up an item that's on our agenda a little bit later. So, Mr. Jordan, if you would make your report later, when we open up item 9, we'd be grateful. Good? Okay. So let's move on to item number 8. Mr. Clerk, please read that into the record.
Oh, yes, Madam Mayor. Item number 8, subject introduction of zoning ordinance amendments and objective design standards for streamlined housing projects. Recommendation that council introduce and subsequently adopt by reading of title only an ordinance of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara, amending Chapter 30.145 of the Santa Barbara Municipal Code to establish procedures for processing streamlined housing projects pursuant to Government Code Section 65913.4 and finding project to be exempt from CEQA pursuant to CEQA Guideline 15061B3 and adopt by reading of title only a resolution of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara adopting objective design standards for streamlined housing projects.
Thanks. And Ms. Deisty, you're all ready to go?
I am, thank you. And good afternoon, Madam Mayor and members of council. We could go to the next slide, please. So the purpose of the hearing today is to introduce the amendments that were just described to the zoning ordinance and consider a resolution that would adopt objective design standards that we prepared in response to Senate Bill 35, which is known as the Streamlined Ministerial Approval Process. Next slide. For my presentation today, I'll include some background on this Senate Bill 35 and how we responded to the bill. I'll do a brief summary of the objective design standards and the ordinance amendments, and I will conclude on our recommendation. Next slide, please. And then you can go to the next slide. So Senate Bill 35 went into effect in 2018, and it's due to expire in 2026. It was intended to facilitate and expedite affordable multi-unit housing projects by streamlining the review process, in particular design review. And it was specifically designed for cities and counties that are not meeting their regional housing needs allocation goals handed down from the state. So that includes us here in the city of Santa Barbara. And most projects that are requesting this streamlined review process are required to include a certain percentage of units that are affordable to lower income households. Next slide, please. So the state, as I mentioned, uses progress on meeting those regional housing need allocation goals to determine if a city has to offer the streamlined approval process and then the percent of affordable units that are required per project. This is calculated by the State Department of Housing and Community Development, and they base it on permit data that comes at the mid and end point of a housing element planning period. So if the determination finds that you're not meeting your above moderate unit numbers, then projects of 10 or more units must include 10% of those units affordable to lower income households. And that's where we were at when this program first became effective. Later, if you're not meeting your very low and low unit numbers, then projects applying for streamlined review must include 50% of the units affordable to lower income households. Next slide, please. So as shown on this slide, we are meeting our above moderate numbers, but we are making what they call insufficient progress in all the other categories. And therefore, we're in that category now of projects that want to be reviewed under Senate Bill 35 must include 50% of their units as affordable units. Next slide. Also to be considered for the streamlined review process, a project needs to propose multiple rental or for sale housing units. If it's a mixed use project, at least 2/3 of the floor area needs to be devoted to residential. And then there's certain sites that are excluded from qualifying for this process, and that includes the entire coastal zone, sensitive habitat areas, sites that have active hazardous waste issues, earthquake faults, things like that, and also mobile homes and RV parks. The project cannot require demolition of historic structures or housing that's been occupied by tenants within the past 10 years, or any housing that's subject to renter price controls. And again, 50% of the units must be affordable. So this sort of narrows the number of sites that actually would be eligible for this process quite a bit. Next slide. And then I just wanted to go over how a process is reviewed under Senate Bill 35. So it is an opt-in program for developers, and it is mainly focused on shortening the design review time. There is a preliminary step to even qualify for this streamlined review, and that means the applicant has to submit a preliminary application, and that initiates about a 90-day tribal consultation process. And that's to ensure there's no impacts to tribal resources as a result of the project. Once that's concluded, then they can proceed with submitting a regular Senate Bill 35 application. Once that application is considered complete, staff would be reviewing it, and per state law, we have 60 or 90 days, depending on the number of units, to notify the applicant whether or not the project complies with all objective standards. Next, the project would be scheduled for a ministerial design review hearing, and that would focus only on assessing compliance with objective design standards. Once a decision is made on design review, then it would proceed forward with other necessary permit approvals which could include, a building permit, grading permit, demolition, things like that. But there is no further streamlining once it gets to that stage in the process. Next slide. And then you can go to the next one. So we had, based on passage of this bill, a work program was started up, and it started with the appointment of a work group that included 2 members each of the Planning Commission, Historic Landmarks Commission, and Architectural Board of Review. They were specifically tasked with assisting us with drafting the objective design standards. We held 12 meetings to draft these standards, and we also prepared the zoning ordinance amendments and applicant handouts. Public input to date included several meetings with the Historic Landmarks Commission and Architectural Board of Review, where we provided an overview of our work program, and then we came back with a admin draft of the objective design standards. We held several meetings with members of the American Institute of Architects Advocacy Group, and we had reviews specifically by the Housing Authority, People's Self-Help Housing, and Habitat for Humanity of the objective design standards. And we also posted them on the website for public input. So now we're in this final phase of decision maker review and adoption. Next slide. As part of this project, we're also developing a supplemental application for applicants who want to use this process, which would include a checklist of the design standards. And this would help guide applicants and staff through the process of confirming eligibility for streamlined review. Also working on a photo gallery that would illustrate examples of the design standards. Next slide, please. So before I get into describing what's in the design standards, I wanted to acknowledge and thank all those that assisted with the effort. And that included the work group members who were Deborah Schwartz and John Campanella of the Planning Commission, Anthony Grumbine and Ed Lenvik of Historic Landmarks Commission, and Kevin Moore and Howard Wittosh of Architectural Board of Review. I also had a great team of staff helping draft and review these standards, and multiple members, as I mentioned, of the American Institute of Architects Advocacy Group. So it was a group effort. And next slide, please. The State Department of Housing and Community Development publishes a guidelines on how to implement Senate Bill 35. And within those guidelines, they define what an objective design standard is, which are standards that involve no personal or subjective judgment by a public official. They need to be published and adopted by ordinance or resolution, and that needs to happen before submittal of a development application. Next slide. So when we started on this project, we initially intended to source objective standards from the city's many existing design guidelines as much as possible, because we wanted to be efficient and not reinvent the wheel. This was quite challenging, however, because they do vary quite a bit in style. They date from different eras, and they address specific types of development in specific areas of the city. Next slide. So after several work group meetings, it became clear we really needed to focus this effort, and staff recommended and the work group agreed that we would use the El Pueblo Viejo design guidelines as the template for our objective design standards. And specifically, we focused on the Spanish colonial revival style because this is the best known and most distinctive style in the city. And according to state HCD guidelines, you can pick a particular style as long as the elements are clearly described. The El Pueblo Viejo guidelines are straightforward, and with a few adjustments, they were easily modified to objective standards. And then selecting this style was appropriate for this effort because it meets other city goals. It tends to be pedestrian oriented, it's human scaled, energy efficient, and can be cost effective because of use of simple forms. Next slide. So I wanted to just give you a brief example of how we turned what were guidelines from El Pueblo Viejo into standards. So for example, the guideline says that doors and windows should be recessed away from outer wall surfaces. And to make it a standard, you need to be more specific how deep that recess should be. So the standard says to recess doors and windows a minimum of 4 inches into the wall at the frame. So that's the sort of process we went through for all the different topics that are included in the design standards. Next slide. And then this picture is just up here to show some of the beautiful features that we worked on in our design standards, things like outdoor lighting, balconies, awnings, the roof type and form and materials, wall surfaces, all kinds of exterior building details that went into these objective design standards. Next slide. I just wanted to cover briefly, during our approval process, we did get some recommendations from the Planning Commission, and they did recommend approval of the objective design standards as long as we did some additional outreach, review, and revisions prior to coming to City Council review. So first, on their recommendation, we conducted a careful review and made a few edits to clarify the standards and ensure they were all truly objective. Second, on their recommendation, we worked with the Sustainability and Resilience Department staff to ensure that the rooftop equipment screening standard would be able to accommodate rooftop solar energy systems. So we made a edit to the document to make sure that would happen. And then they did ask and request that we solicit feedback, as I mentioned, from Housing Authority and People's Self-Help Housing. And we also added Habitat for Humanity. And we did hear back from all 3 of those groups. And to summarize their responses, they did have some concerns about some of the provisions in state law that we don't really have control over, but it's for workforce requirements for projects during construction, and some concerns about the permit process itself. And then the other, what we also heard were some of the requirements for high quality materials could add costs to projects. But in general, we did hear that they felt that having objective design process and standards would really help their projects moving forward. Next slide. And then I'm excited to announce we have a related work effort that is actually right on the tails of this one. And it's the result of a grant that we got from State Department of Housing and Community Development to embark on the next phase of objective design standards. So what this funding does is enable us to hire a consultant to work with staff and the public on crafting expanded design standards that could apply to other types of multi-unit housing projects, not just those that qualify for Senate Bill 35 streamline review. And in this next phase, what we hope to do is have a palette of architectural styles, so not just Spanish colonial revival, but all kinds of standards that work for different kinds of styles and for specific neighborhoods. We also want to specifically look at standards that would incorporate green building, sustainable building considerations. We really want to work with our affordable housing purveyors and see if we need to have any exceptions or particular standards that would help them, and also look at standards that would accommodate housing for seniors and persons with disabilities. So that process is just getting started, and we have a request for proposals out for a consultant on this effort that will be due in the middle of this month, and we're, like I said, really excited to continue on this journey. Next slide. So to summarize what's in the zoning ordinance amendments, what they do is establish how a project qualifies for the streamline review. And it includes that they are exempt from discretionary review. They're subject to all of the city's objective standards, and they're not allowed to receive exceptions to objective standards unless it's modifications related to density bonus. And the amendments also establish the review and appeal process. Next slide. So I'm just going to conclude at this point on my recommendation about introducing the ordinance to amend the zoning ordinance for the procedures for processing Senate Bill 35 projects and adopt a resolution to adopt the objective design standards. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Deisty. We'll take questions from the council. I do have one. I'll start off if my colleagues don't mind. I saw a letter from Rob Fredericks of the Housing Authority that he's hoping for a set of standards related to maybe bungalow or a different style, architectural style. What's your response to when there might be a second style available?
Yes, Madam Mayor and members of council. So yes, in this first effort, like I said, we decided to focus on the one style that is well loved in our city, and we felt like could be obviously easily done within El Pueblo Viejo and other areas of the city. But we do acknowledge that we do need to expand that to lots of different styles. So working with the consultant that I mentioned that we hope to hire very soon, we would be working on styles that'll work in the bungalow neighborhood, or perhaps a more modern style, or a style that works with Victorian buildings, those sorts of things. So that'll be about a 2-year process or so. So it will take a little bit more time. It's a more complicated, inclusive process, but we hope to have that within the terms of the grant, which goes until about 2023.
Okay, well, I'm sorry, I missed it if you had talked about it, and I didn't mean to. We're grateful for what you've done. It sounds like a whole lot of work, so thanks for that. Any other questions for Ms. Deisty at this point? And then we can check and see if there's public comment. That would be the next step after questions. We'll stand by Ms. Deisty. Mr. Stowe, anybody raising their hand to speak?
Yes, Madam Mayor. At this time, we have one member of the public requesting to speak, Anna Marie Gott. And if anyone else would like to speak, please raise your hand within the app, or you may email us at clerk@santabarbaraca.gov. And Anna Marie Gott, I have unmuted you, and you may begin your comment, please.
Council members, how many projects fit the requirements discussed that would allow a project to be processed under Senate Bill 35? I ask this because I don't think that you should actually pass these amendments today. I believe the city needs to determine if any member of the working group who had helped to create these design standards had a conflict of interest that was not identified when they commented on these amendments. I also believe the city needs to determine if any member of an advisory board who commented on these design standards also had a conflict of interest that was, again, not identified when they commented on these amendments, and then these amendments were brought to you. I believe the city has a substantial problem with how it has vetted individuals, or really the lack of vetting of individuals who have been placed on their advisory boards. Before you approve these amendments, the city really does need to do its due diligence on this issue that I've discussed today. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other speakers, Mr. Clerk?
No, Madam Mayor, at this time, no one has indicated they would like to speak on this item.
Okay, we'll close public comment and go to our remarks. Ms. Sneddon, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I actually have a question first before remarks, and if the last commenter, if Anna Marie Gott, if that's an issue at all, I have a question if there are conflicts or anything like that, or if we move ahead either way. I wasn't sure if that was.
Council members, then I would request, it seems like a legal question to me. I don't know if Tava Ostranger or, yeah. Thank you.
Ms. Ostranger, thank you.
Mayor Murillo and Council Member Sneddon, this is a very limited project that would affect, or working group that would affect the entire city. So we didn't see any conflicts.
Thank you. And then I will say, Madam Mayor, that I support these recommendations. This did come to ordinance. It has been through HLC. I think it's really important to keep the work effort going so that we have bungalow style or a variety of styles that would go in different neighborhood compatibility guidelines. But I thought this couldn't be done really, that you could have objective design standards that really fit Santa Barbara, and they have, the staff have really pulled everything out to make this happen and make it workable. And so I support this recommendation.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to comment on the recommendations? Mr. Jordan?
Madam Mayor, I'll weigh in. There's nothing to stand in the way of here. We have to do this. And I'm not kidding myself that one of these described projects will ever be built in this city with the inclusionary numbers that they have to meet to get the streamlining. So projects will continue to go through the normal process without that. But I had this problem in my briefing too on this thing, but to select arbitrarily, maybe arbitrarily is harsh, to select what arguably would be the most expensive design style in this city, and that is a EPV design style, to be the only design style or the first design style that's eligible citywide seems like we're going in the wrong direction. If for some reason a comet fell out of the sky and somebody was able to build a project with whatever those numbers were, 10%, 50% inclusionary in the bands, and needed to get it through the streamlining, they're then forced with design components that increase the construction costs of that project and probably negate out the gain of the streamlining. You know, my poster child, for example, is walk around on any multi-unit residential building in the city and start pointing out to me 4-inch recessed windows on the exterior of that building. That turns every exterior wall into a 10-inch or 12-inch framed wall, which is ludicrous for trying to keep your costs down for multi-unit housing. So again, there's nothing to stand in the way here, but I would have rathered the first design style work through would have been something that was more compatible with the rest of the city and not EPV. And then we would have caught up to EPV afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm trying to look at it the other way, that the incentive of streamlining would maybe bring someone forward with that much inclusionary. So, but I'm grateful for all the work that's been done, and I would support this going forward myself. Would anyone else like to comment or make a motion, and we can move forward? I'll move the recommendation. If someone else will second it, please.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, I was just slow on the, I'll second. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other discussion from my colleagues? Otherwise, we have a motion on the floor. And thank you so much, Ms. Deisty, your staff, the committee that worked hard on it. You named them. Thank you so much, everyone. And we hope this will help with our process of creating more housing. So thank you more easily. We'll take a roll call vote.
Yes, Madam Mayor. This is a motion by Mayor Murillo, seconded by Councilmember Sneddon for the staff recommendation. Councilmember Sneddon.
Yes.
Councilmember Friedman.
Yes.
Councilmember Jordan.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Oscar Gutierrez.
Aye.
Councilmember Alejandro Gutierrez.
Yes.
Councilmember Harmon.
Yes.
Mayor Maria.
Aye. That was unanimous, I'm pretty sure.
Yes.
Thank you so much. We will close that item and move on to the next, number 9, Mr. Clerk, if you would read that into the record.
Yes, Madam Mayor. Item number 9, hazard-based premium pay for grocery and drug retail workers. Recommendation, Ordinance Committee recommendation, that the Ordinance Committee consider recommending for introduction by council an uncodified ordinance of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara establishing hazard-based premium pay for grocery and drug retail workers. Recommendation that council introduce and adopt by at least 5 affirmative votes after reading in full an uncodified emergency ordinance of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara establishing hazard-based premium pay for grocery and drug retail workers, and the council introduce and subsequently adopt by reading of title only an uncodified ordinance of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara establishing hazard-based premium pay for grocery and drug retail workers.
Thank you so much. We'll call up Mr. Kalan. Oh, Mr. Friedman, you have a statement?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I need to recuse myself from this item because my employer and my source of income may be impacted.
Thank you. We'll see you later. Mr. Kalan, should you start and then we have the Ordinance Committee Chair speak, or you can actually say what happened at Ordinance Committee, right? How should we handle it? I can't hear you. Oh, Mr. Clerk, if you would unmute our city attorney. We need to hear his voice.
Oh, yes, Madam Mayor, my apologies. And
Thank you.
Okay.
Honorable Mayor, the Ordinance Committee on a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Oscar Gutierrez, seconded by Councilmember Sneddon, voted 2-1 to forward the non-emergency ordinance to the City Council for your consideration this afternoon.
Understood.
If
We're ready
we
for your
can,
presentation.
thank you. Next slide, please. You've heard the recommendation. It's more expansive than this. It includes both an emergency and a non-emergency ordinance for reasons I'll explain in a minute. Next slide. So on April 20th, the City Council, by a vote of 6-0 with Councilmember Friedman abstaining due to conflict of interest, directed this office with the City Administrator's Office to prepare an emergency ordinance that would establish hazard pay for certain grocery and pharmacy workers. I want to assure the council that there is clear legal authority for this kind of local action. The city's power, of course, comes first from the state constitution, which for a chartered city like Santa Barbara makes it clear that you have the power to make and enforce all laws and regulations necessary to protect the public health and safety. In addition, the labor code explicitly carves out the city's power to act in a manner more stringent than the labor code, and specifically to establish local minimum wages. So in my opinion, the council clearly has authority to undertake the activity of identifying local minimum wages. Next slide. In this instance, the basic rationale offered by the council, which I followed up on in my own research, is that grocery and pharmacy workers have faced greater COVID-19 exposure than other workers. This issue has been litigated and is still in litigation involving the cities of Long Beach and San Jose in the Bay Area. In the Long Beach case, which is somewhat further along, the city argued and the California Grocers Association conceded that is, they acknowledged that grocery workers face at least a slightly elevated risk of mortality from COVID-19. That's a very significant fact in the council's analysis. Next slide. On April 20th, some council members expressed concern about the emergency findings. Before we discuss those, I wanted to advise the council on the basic legal standards you would be held to account for by a court reviewing your action. This is a legislative action being proposed by the council, an ordinance. It's the making of law, so it's legislative. In this kind of situation, the council must have a rational basis for what it does. That is a deferential standard, meaning it comes out of the concept of separation of powers. And in general, when the courts see the city council acting like legislators, they will be very slow to undo your determinations of what is rational and what is not. So the basic legal standard that you have to meet for almost any kind of categorization you will do in this ordinance: how much money, which workers, what kinds of stores, how long. All of those questions really boil down to whether there's any reasonably conceivable set of facts that would support the distinctions you draw. As you can hear from the words that I've spoken and quoted on the slide, that's a very generous standard. And one way to think of it is this: the courts don't view it as their job to judge the wisdom of our elected officials. They view that to be the job of the voters on election day. So in using your wisdom to build this ordinance, in general, the courts will be deferential to your choices in order to preserve the voters' will. Next slide, please. The basic requirements council directed on April 20th were as follows. Certain workers were to receive a $5 an hour pay boost for the hazards they were experiencing for a period of 60 days. The council also asked that we provide a credit for businesses that were already providing a hazard-based pay component, and the council directed that the ordinance apply to large companies, that is, companies with at least 300 workers nationally. The council did not specify how many local employees would be required. We've put 20 in the ordinance as a placeholder for your deliberation, and we'll explain why when we compare our ordinance to those of other cities. Next slide, please. So here's a quick summary of the policy issues the ordinance presents. How much pay, for how long, which businesses, which workers, and how much credit to provide for companies that are already providing hazard pay. As you can see, while the council mentioned credit, it did not identify an amount. Looking at the ordinances, the vast majority provide credit of 100%, that is a dollar reduction in the ordinance requirement for each dollar of hazard pay currently being paid by the affected companies. Said another way, I did not find any ordinance that looked back to see whether a company paid hazard pay during the earlier phases of the COVID-19 pandemic. All of the ordinances look forward. Next slide, please. Oh, excuse me, let's stay on this, back up. Thank you. On which workers, the ordinances pretty uniformly focus on grocery stores, big box retailers, and pharmacies. The proposal in front of the city council today, both in non-emergency and in emergency form, would apply only to stores with 300 employees nationally, 20 employees in Santa Barbara, and in addition, if it's a grocery store, it would have to be at least 15,000 square feet. If it is a big box store, meaning a store that does not sell primarily food, non-taxable items, it would have to be 85,000 square feet. I frankly don't know whether we have one of those here. Finally, most of the ordinances and the proposal for Santa Barbara in front of the council today covers all retail drugstores, all pharmacies, that is, without regard to size. Next slide, please. This slide will stay on for quite a while, and I apologize for the small size. This represents work done by the city administrator's office to identify the cities with hazard pay ordinances arising out of COVID-19. I took that information and tried to build a comparison chart so that the city council could look at what's in front of it for Santa Barbara in relation to what's happening around the rest of the state. You'll see towards the bottom of the slide, highlighted in yellow, a line that says Santa Barbara proposal. That reflects the policy choices I mentioned on the page before. When you look at this proposal, at this comparison chart, it's noteworthy that cities like American Canyon, which is a residential suburb along the Interstate 80 corridor between San Francisco and Sacramento, Berkeley, Daly City, Millbrae, Oakland, San Francisco, San Jose, San Leandro, they do not include a meaningful local size requirement, meaning if the company meets the national size requirement, those cities do not require any specific number of employees within the city, so that one is good enough. So in looking at this chart, in the column that says local size, while we have used 20 as a placeholder number, the actual range ranges from 1 to 20, as you can see on this chart. The ordinance committee had some discussion about that. The full council may wish to discuss that issue as well. In terms of amount, virtually all of the ordinances were $5 or $4. The council's proposal is tightly within that range. Likewise, in terms of duration, the city's duration is closest to that of the city and county of San Francisco at 60 days. Many ran longer. However, as you can see, many were effective several months earlier. The last comment relates to the size parameter, the national size parameter. As you can see, it ranges from places like San Francisco, which for reasons of their own administration use the number of worldwide employees rather than national employees. Most of the other cities clustered around 300 employees nationally. Now, the last thing I'd like to mention is that many of these ordinances were in roughly the same form. We took a pretty careful look. There were some repetitive typos. I'm sure there are new typos in this ordinance, and I'm also sure that they are my responsibility. I think I've edited out everyone else's. Okay, next slide, please. This is a discussion about process and really an explanation of why we have both emergency and non-emergency ordinances in front of the city council. The council may remember that on April 20th, I expressed some concern that corporate profits might not necessarily support emergency findings. To my surprise, on reading the preliminary injunction decision in the Long Beach case, that is California Grocers Association versus the city of Long Beach, the court determined that the profits of larger companies being higher was a good reason to include only larger store employees in this ordinance. In other words, the court said it was a rational reason for the city council to use in determining what size stores the ordinance should apply to. However, having said that, because emergency findings do move us into a somewhat more rigorous line of review, we're recommending that the council move on an emergency ordinance, and if successful there, also introduce for first reading a non-emergency ordinance. The non-emergency version of the ordinance in your packet today would apply only to employers who failed to make payments under the emergency ordinance. I'll say it again. The non-emergency ordinance applies only to companies that do not pay under the emergency ordinance. So let's imagine that a company felt that emergency findings were unlawful and chose to challenge that ordinance. I think that would likely be an unproductive effort because the non-emergency ordinance would be on the books and applicable if that company had not, for any reason, paid under the emergency ordinance. So this is a practice that, for example, the city of Irvine followed. It's a common practice with emergency ordinances to ask the elected officials to introduce a non-emergency measure at the same time. Now, I'm mindful that it's consequential as to the vote required to carry the measure. Nonetheless, the advice that we're providing is that you should do both. Next slide, please. I'm happy to answer questions, and if I might, I believe the ordinance committee found it helpful to have the comparison slide up during deliberations. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Okay. So well, I'll just open up the floor for questions. Ms. Harmon.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you so much, Mr. City Attorney. I very much appreciate the effort that clearly went into putting this together. Thank you. Just one question on the structure that you're recommending. Is there, so I think I understand why it makes sense to do both the emergency and the non-emergency ordinance, but is there a downside legally to doing just the non-emergency piece? And what would that look like if that's the route? Because I get if we did just urgency, there would be downside there, but just non-emergency, the regular ordinance, can you sketch out what that would look like and what the potential pitfalls of that approach might be? Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor, Council Member, Councilwoman Harmon. Thank you for asking that question. I don't think there's any downside because the 60-day period would run from the effective date of the non-emergency ordinance, and the council's power to require an enhanced minimum wage is clear even outside the emergency context. So I feel that I would advise that enacting the non-emergency ordinance really takes away any argument about the council's power to take this action.
I'll follow up with the question, Mr. Kahlon. So the slide before this, if we do emergency or urgency, 5 of the 6 of us voting would have to approve it. Do I have that right?
Yes, Honorable Mayor.
Okay, so that is something to keep in mind. Any other questions for our city attorney and Ms. Sneddon, questions?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I still think it's really important for us to have confirmed which stores this applies to. And I know we didn't have that in ordinance, but when it did come up last week, I think that was a question more than one of us had about which exactly stores does this affect. And I'm not sure we No.
Mr. Kalan, well, it's the stores that have 300 national employees. But go ahead, Mr. Kalan.
Honorable Mayor, Council members, Sneddon, I advised the ordinance committee that I did not have a list of which stores in Santa Barbara specifically this would apply to.
And
But we did get a list from Rachel Torres of the UFCW union. Okay, but Mr. Kalan, I thought you got that list, but you didn't want to use it in this presentation?
I was not able to verify it, Honorable Mayor, so rather than reproduce it, it had at least one company that I thought to be in error, and I didn't want to perpetuate that.
Okay, so that's a sticking point for you, Ms. Snedden?
Yes, I mean, in concept, and I've moved it forward from ordinance, and it's something, yes, that I still have a question about. It's, I think we need to know exactly who it applies to, if we're going to have this type of ordinance. And then I just want to confirm what I heard, that it would be okay to pass the non-emergency ordinance and not the emergency ordinance. And that's correct.
Honorable Mayor, Councilmember Sneddon, if by okay, you mean, will it result in the specified workers getting 60 days of $5 an hour hazard pay? The answer is yes.
Okay.
Either
And
way. The difference would be that if the emergency ordinance passes, it would be effective immediately, and the duty to begin pay would commence immediately. Under the non-emergency ordinance, it would be effective on the 31st day following second reading. And by my calculation, that would put us into June before the hazard pay began to accrue.
And would it, I know they're not backward looking, but if it was the non-emergency ordinance or non-urgency ordinance, would it be calculated from today or from the June date when it's enacted?
The duty to begin paying would start in June, and the employer's credit would depend what they were paying at that time.
In June, okay.
Correct.
Okay. I think those are my questions at this time. Thank you.
Any other questions from the council before we check to see if there's public comment? Mr. Clerk, we'll call you back and ask if anyone's raising their hand, and I would announce to the public in the GoToWebinar audience, raise your hand if you want to speak on this subject. Mr. Stowe?
Yes, Madam Mayor. At this time, we have 4 members of the public who'd like to speak on this item. Our first speaker will be Ryan Allen, followed by Anna Marie Gott. And Ryan Allen, you have been unmuted, and you may begin your comment, please.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Ryan Allain, and I am speaking on behalf of the California Retailers Association. We also chair a statewide coalition called Californians for a Safe and Rapid Recovery, coalition of nearly 50 national, statewide, and local organizations opposed to government-mandated premium pay ordinances like the one being considered here today in Santa Barbara. We respectfully urge your no vote on this premium pay ordinance. First and foremost, this ordinance does not take into consideration the fact that California's COVID-19 daily case rate is rapidly declining, and vaccines and vaccinations are available to every Californian over the age of 16. In fact, 79% of Santa Barbara County residents over 16 years old have received at least one shot of the vaccine. Additionally, food retailers voluntarily increased pay and benefits by $17 billion nationwide in 2020. To say that we haven't done enough, done our part, is ignoring reality. Let me be clear, grocery business operates on razor-thin margins, and premium pay ordinances will have dire impacts. Last year, despite an increase in sales, the Food Industry Association reported that in 2020, profit margins were an average of only 2.5% because of added PPE costs and higher pay benefits for employees. In fact, the City of LA's Economic Impact Report found that government-mandated premium pay would, quote, eliminate all current profit margin, end quote, for retailers, forcing them to raise prices or close stores. The consequences of premium pay should not be a surprise to any of you. After the cities of Los Angeles and Long Beach passed their ordinances, 5 stores announced their closure, leading to hundreds of lost jobs in the void in communities that depend on them. And a study by the California Grocers Association estimates that premium pay mandates will add about $400 to the annual cost of food and household supplies for the typical family of 4 in California. Premium pay mandates, such as the one being discussed today, put local governments in the middle of employer and labor bargaining processes. Decisions to legislate pay should not be made at the local level, but decided at Sacramento, Washington, D.C. Instead, local government should be focused on quickly administrating vaccinations to keep everyone safe while ensuring its rapid economic recovery. Thank you.
Thank you. Another speaker?
Oh, yes, Madam Mayor. At this time, we have 4 additional speakers: Nadia Abu-Shanab, Rachel Torres, Daniel Mora, and Anna Marie Gott. And Nadia Abu-Shanab, you have been unmuted, and you may begin your comment, please.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Nadia Abu-Shanab. I live in the 3rd District, and I'm here with the Santa Barbara County Action Network, a local nonprofit that supports social and economic justice and has been following this issue from the beginning. So first, I'd just like to say thank you, Council Members Harmon and Oscar Gutierrez, for initially bringing this ordinance to the Council last week. And thank you to the Mayor and the entire Council for your thorough discussion last week and also today, and for moving this forward in a timely manner. SBCAN supports a $5 per hour wage increase for grocery and drug retail workers for at least 60 days. And we do support lowering the local employee requirement from 20 employees to 1 employee. We would be very proud to see Santa Barbara join 30 other cities and counties across California in supporting and honoring the workers that have done so much for our community throughout the pandemic, while continuing to face risk of infection while the vaccine is still being administered inside their stores. These workers did not sign up to be on the front lines of a global pandemic when they started working at a drug or grocery retail store, but they have bravely stepped up to the challenge and have consistently kept our community fed and healthy. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Another speaker?
Yes, Madam Mayor. Our next speaker will be Rachel Torres. And if anyone else would like to speak, please raise your hand within the app, or you may email us at clerk@santabarbaraca.gov. And Rachel Torres, you have been unmuted and you may begin your comment, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor Murillo, City Council members. Thank you for bringing this forward in a timely manner. Thank you to the city staff, the City Attorney's Office for carefully reviewing these policies. As the City Attorney mentioned, this policy has been vetted in the court. It has been passed in 30 cities and counties throughout the region. And prices have not gone up. The 99% of the stores have not closed. Alhambra, Santa Monica, Coachella, Palm Springs, San Francisco, Berkeley. Folks in cities all across California are being paid this, and with very little note of any issues involved. So we thank the council for moving this forward. As council has mentioned, this is a temporary measure, only 60 days. The companies that would be included in this measure are the same companies that are paying this in other cities throughout the state. And this is the right thing to do at the right time. We thank the council for moving this forward.
Thank you, Ms. Torres. Next speaker?
Yes, Madam Mayor. Our final 3 speakers currently are Daniel Mora, Anna Marie Gott, and Stanley Zankov. Daniel Mora, you have been unmuted and you may begin your comment, please.
Hi, good afternoon, Madam Mayor, City Council members. Thank you very much for bringing this forward. My name is Daniel Mora. I represent the Central Coast Labor Council, about 100,000 workers on the Central Coast. Just want to say that the Central Coast Labor Council supports the $5 wage increase ordinance for grocery and drug retail workers. These workers weren't expecting to be on the front lines of a pandemic or, as we move forward administering vaccinations, at the risk of their health, safety, and the health and safety of their loved ones. While various industries and business sectors were shut down and financially affected negatively, grocery and drug retail stores continued to make record profits. They were able to do this because their workers took on that risk. And even with the vaccinations, workers still face a threat. They will continue to do so until we reach herd immunity. 60-day ordinance for $5 an hour will establish a fair compensation for the work and risk that the employees will continue to take on for the foreseeable future. So thank you. We do fully support this ordinance.
Thanks. Speaker?
Yes, Madam Mayor, our next speaker is Anna Marie Gott. Anna Marie Gott, you have been unmuted and you may begin your comment, please.
Council members, please vote no on both ordinances. These ordinances only affect a handful of workers. Big grocery and retail stores are already taking other cities to court over similar ordinances. Do you really think Santa Barbara isn't going to see a lawsuit? Did you realize that delivery drivers for Amazon won't be affected by this? Amazon uses subcontractors and they would not be covered. Yet Amazon and other companies like them have seen record profits too. Is it fair or equitable to pass either of these ordinances considering this? Frankly, introducing this ordinance now already looks like quid pro quo in return for an endorsement for this year's election. It also looks like these items were only introduced for council members to have a box checked next to hazard pay on campaign literature. This isn't a permanent raise, it's really a gimmick. Instead of acting as 60-day ordinance for a tiny number of people whose unions endorse some council members for re-election 14 months after a pandemic, the council should really be looking at substantially raising wages for all residents by creating a living wage for workers in Santa Barbara without exemptions. You could do this within 90 days. You don't need a year of study or work groups. All of this has already been done before in terms of looking at living a wage and raising wages in cities very similar to Santa Barbara. Frankly, I'm just going to reiterate that this ordinance is really too little, too late, and it just frankly stinks to high heaven that you actually have this in front of you today. Let me remind you that right now the city of Santa Barbara has a $13 or $14 an hour minimum wage. That is a poverty wage. This council already supports generational poverty, and none of you have actually brought any item related to a living wage since any of you have been elected. Really, there is no time like the present to do it and to get it done within 90 days. If you have the political will to do it, you can actually do it. If you fail to, it's simply because you want to keep workers in Santa Barbara working for the service, hospitality, and tourism industry working under poverty wages. Thank you.
Was there another speaker, Mr. Hall? One more, you said?
Yes, Madam Mayor, our final speaker for this item is Stanley Zankov. And Stanley Zankov, I have unmuted you and you may begin your comment, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon again, Madam Mayor and City Council members. I'm calling in support in support of the proposed ordinance today on behalf of CAUSE, the Central Coast Alliance United for Sustainable Economy, and on behalf of myself, a former grocer and resident in the 2nd District. Thank you again for moving this forward expeditiously and for your serious consideration since its introduction by Council Members Harmon and Gutierrez. And thank you again to the both of you, especially for your leadership on this vital issue. And of course, to the city staff for all your careful work on this as well. Just to echo Rachel Torres with UFCW 770's remarks just a few speakers ago, this is a well-vetted temporary measure that many other cities throughout the state have implemented without any issues. And again, unfortunately, the pandemic is far from over. You all know this, and these workers are still on the front lines of it. So passing this ordinance is absolutely the right thing to do. And I appreciate your serious consideration. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Sankoff, thank you. Any other speakers, Mr. Clerk?
No, Madam Mayor, no additional speakers at this time.
Okay, we'll close public comment and we'll go to our deliberations. And what's in front of us is whether to go for both emergency ordinance and a non-emergency ordinance, or just the non-emergency ordinance, because I think that's what the ordinance committee passed. But we're ready to hear what you have to say, Mr. Jordan. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm going to say my piece and get out of the way. I wasn't supportive when this came out of ordinance committee, and I suspect there might be some wrangling on the terms of this to make it, so I'll just get out of the way. The easy one for me is the emergency ordinance. I just could never make the findings for the immediacy of it. So the tougher one for me is the regular ordinance. I've had a week to think about it, talk with people. You mentioned Rachel Torres. Rachel and Daniel Mora were very kind the other day to walk me through an hour of the pros and cons of this from their side, and I appreciate the time they spent with me. But I'm concerned about that this is just an effort to keep up with other cities and do something good, which it is good, but that the evidence doesn't actually show that we're going to apply the ordinance to those that caused the issue. And that is large national companies that reaped what are being called outsized profits. Nobody today can come up with a list of who this would affect in the city limits, and we can't see who those entities are, or that they are actually a company that gained outsized profits in 2020 while putting their workers on the front line in the face of a pandemic. I also have difficulty with the thought that we're categorizing as non-heroes an entire group of people that are just as heroic as the ones we're doing this action for. If you want to come over, I could introduce you to a couple in my household that were on the front lines. One's a nurse who has to shower off by the garden hose at 8 o'clock at night when she comes home from working on a COVID wing, because she doesn't want to infect her over 60-year-old parents or her 2 young toddlers. She happens also to work for a union-controlled hospital that was slow out the gate, refused to do PPE, and made nurses reuse and clean their equipment as they went wing to wing or room to room. Everybody's got these people. Everybody's got these heroes that they know. The guy at the gas station, the guy at over any counter that stayed open during it, and to try and gather them. So if you were to broaden the scope of the ordinance to try and gather them in, then you run afoul of just chasing the large national corporations that reap these outside profits. I see this just as a circle you can't get out of. So I would have been much more supportive to talk about this and discuss this. I would have hoped in the week that we would have a better idea of who it would affect specifically. The list you mentioned from the food and commercial workers, there were more than one mistake on that. There were multiple companies shown in the city that weren't, and there were companies that should have been on that list that weren't also. So that list wasn't a good list either. I also talked last week, I think, about somebody helping me with why this is not analogous to the discussion we always have on sales tax increases and how it's regressive. To me, there is no doubt that the more we impact the companies and in Santa Barbara with this ordinance, the more regressive it's going to be. People will have reduced hours, perhaps lose their jobs. Certainly, everybody's going to see price increases passed along to the consumer. For you and me, maybe that doesn't matter, but for the same reason, maybe a sales tax increase doesn't matter. But certainly the case is always made when we talk about sales tax increases, how regressive that is to a majority of the community. And I have a hard time understanding why this type of action does not also serve that same purpose, to be regressive to the part of the community that has a struggle to purchase their groceries on an ongoing basis. So those are my reasons. So I can't see anything I'm going to hear overcoming them. So I'm just going to kind of get out of the way, said my piece, and I'll let the rest of you hash out what this is going to look like. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you for your clarity. We're grateful for your perspective. Ms. Sneddon, your thoughts.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have really struggled with this, and I can't support the urgency because of the timing of it, and it's not sort of internally consistent with what I'm thinking of as the pandemic. If it could be retro, but I understand it can't. I'm supportive, or was out of ordinance, of the non-urgency ordinance, but really only because I see it as a first step towards looking at a living wage. And I have very, very much discomfort about one sector being singled out. And I was actually even more swayed that way after listening to Councilmember Jordan. It reflects also what I've seen in my household as well. And if you add to that orderlies in hospitals and in emergency rooms, where my daughter did work and then left because there was no PPE available. When you think about EMTs and nurses and our own city employees who are on the front lines and really deserving of hazard pay, I just am having a hard time, and I'll listen to the rest of deliberations and continue to think about this. But it also occurs to me is there are other industries that have had huge profits. I'm thinking of the cannabis industry, and they have farm workers who are not unionized and are not protected. And it's just, I would not have brought this forward. So my struggle is that now that it's here, do I say no to doing what can be done, but it just does not make consistent sense to me. I'll leave it at that for now.
Okay. Well, we're ready to hear more. Ms. Harmon, thanks.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I appreciate it. And first, again, I just want to start by thanking city staff, Mr. Colon in particular, for their work on this. I know this came up quickly, and I really appreciate the effort, and it deserves to be acknowledged again. So, I made sort of my argument and laid this out last week or the week before when this came, so I'm not going to repeat myself here. I do just want to speak to a couple of issues that I've heard coming up again and again and again. And really the first is this issue of this is too late, COVID is over. And I think we've all acknowledged that that's simply not true. But I would also point out, even though we're moving toward a vaccinated future, until we're all vaccinated, until we reach herd immunity, our grocery and drug retail frontline workers remain at increased risk. So I think that's really important to point out. You know, we're here virtually still, meeting from our offices. These are folks that are interfacing with the public day after day, hour after hour, and there is still risk. And I also just want to point out, you know, that we hope, moving out of this pandemic period doesn't at all negate or erase the sacrifices made by these workers over the last year to keep their business doors open and to keep our supply chain running. So I think for me, if we believe that an ordinance like this or an effort like this would have been appropriate 6 months ago, the same reasons still apply today. If we believed that they deserved this recognition 6 months ago, surely they still do today. And then the second is this question of selectivity. I'm not sure quite how to phrase it, that we're picking out a specific industry. And I want to start by saying I really appreciate that sentiment that my colleagues have shared. It's something that I have also struggled with. And I think it really speaks to who we are as a council, that we really want to do the most for the most number of people. And I think that deserves to be acknowledged. But where I came down on this is that it really, what we end up deciding, well, I guess I should say, I don't think it serves people to decide that because we can't in this moment do something broadly, that broadly applies to everyone, that we should do nothing for anyone. I just don't think that serves people. I don't think that that's a good way to approach policy. And I don't think that's what equity asks of us. I don't think equity asks us to do nothing unless it can be applied equally to everyone in every industry. I think equity asks that we look at the totality of the circumstances and center justice for our community members in light of those circumstances. And I think that's what we're trying to do with this ordinance. And to Councilmember Snedden in particular, I love hearing what you're saying. I so look forward to your proposals and building on this. Mayor Pro Tem Gutierrez said, I believe it was him at the ordinance committee, that this is a first step. And that's how I see it as well. Like, I couldn't put it better myself. This is a first step, and we do have to start somewhere. This is a big shift. It's a move toward putting our community members at the center of our conversations. We have to start somewhere. And I believe this is an important opportunity in doing so. But again, I really look forward to Councilmember Snedden's proposals, and I absolutely agree, and look forward to continuing the conversation. But I do think it's important that we take this step today, and I will be supporting it. It seems from what I'm hearing, I would be supportive of both, and I really appreciate the creativity and care that went into that legal construct, but I would certainly be supportive of a regular ordinance as well. So with that, Madam Mayor, I will end my comments there and appreciate my colleagues' consideration. Look forward to hopefully passing this today. Thank you.
Okay, it does look like we would be going to a non-emergency, a regular ordinance motion. Ms. Gutierrez, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have a question for the city attorney. If he can pop up, please.
Mr. Kalan?
I want to address public comment. There was a public comment that other cities are getting sued for this type of ordinance. What are the chances of us getting sued?
Honorable Mayor, Councilmember Alejandro Gutierrez, I can't really answer that directly. The two cases I'm aware of, one in Southern California involving Long Beach, the other in Northern California involving San Jose and one other city, the name of which is escaping me. I think that on a non-emergency ordinance, the law is very clear that the city council has the power to establish minimum wages for particular classes of workers as long as you have some rational reason for doing so. So while you may be sued on a non-emergency ordinance, I believe the city council has very good grounds to support and defend itself.
Thank you. And I just want to say that I do want to look into living wage ordinance, not at this moment. I think maybe we can start this discussion after we pass the budget. We're going through very difficult times in the city right now after COVID. I will be supporting this ordinance. I do agree with my colleagues that every person in different job sectors that were working 24 hours during COVID nonstop are definitely heroes. I have in my family nurses, nurses assistants, police officers. I have friends that are paramedics and friends that work for the city, that public works that never stopped. But we also have to keep in mind that, and I know grocery workers, where I'm struggling is for the smaller grocery stores that are not going to get this benefit. But like Ms. Harmon said, I do see this bigger picture of taking the first step and maybe moving into a living wage ordinance. But we also have to keep in mind that grocery workers weren't trained to really confront this pandemic, where they had to deal with people fighting in the stores, them getting harassed, and some even got beat up. And some of them didn't have the proper equipment to, avoid the COVID virus, and a lot of them did get the virus. So we also have to keep in mind that I'm not trying to diminish the other job sectors, but grocery workers, just like people that were working in public works, they weren't prepared for something like this, where in the other sectors, they are kind of aware of, in their jobs, especially in the hospitals, of dealing with some sort of, virus and medical situation. But I definitely support this because I do want to move into a living wage ordinance in the future.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Gutierrez.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I want to thank my colleagues for the comments, the public comments, and city staff for their efforts on this issue. And I'm going to be supporting both the regular and emergency ordinance. I just feel like this is something that we need to really, we got to be, we got to be able to be brave, and help out those that can't really speak up for themselves. The grocery store employees, they can't really call in right now to voice how this will affect their lives. And again, I don't want to diminish all the other frontline workers that sacrifice their life and safety during this pandemic. But as I stated earlier, this is just a step into a giant leap that I feel that most of us are inclined to take, but we just got to take this step. And that's all I have to say for now. Thanks.
But before you go, would you make a motion to move forward the non-emergency ordinance? Mayor Pro Tem Gutierrez, let's do that one first, and then we'll see if there's enough support for the emergency, because that'll take 5 votes.
Yes, I make a motion to approve the non-emergency hero pay ordinance.
And I'll go ahead and second it and make my comments, if I may. I looked at the county's dashboard, and as of today, only 33.5% of the county's residents are fully vaccinated. So 33%. I think it's clear that the stores that will be effective are the largest stores that made huge profits during the pandemic. So I'm trusting that those stores will need to pay those workers. When I would go to the supermarket, I mean, even now it's stressful. You know, we're all masked up. But last year it was really unpleasant to go to a supermarket, and I got to leave after 40 minutes when I got my supplies. And those workers were there all day long, in danger of catching the virus. No one was vaccinated a year ago. And I really, really appreciate the way Mayor Pro Tem Gutierrez said it at the Ordinance Committee meeting, as stated earlier. This is a small step. We aren't recognizing everyone who were heroes during the pandemic, who continue to be, but it's a small step that we can take today. So what's before us is the ordinary non-emergency ordinance, which I believe takes 4 votes. And then we'll see if the emergency or urgency one has support after this. Ms. Sneddon, your comments to the motion?
Yes, Madam Mayor, ordinance, and then I think we didn't fully discuss it here, the threshold for the local number of workers being 20. If we are going forward with this, I'd be in favor of that being 1. I don't see why there are, whatever the number of local workers is, would make a difference on that. But we haven't discussed that, and it's not in the motion. So I just wanted to.
Well, let's ask if Mr. Gutierrez would add that into the motion, and then I would agree to that as the seconder. Mayor Pro Tem, from 20 to 1?
Yes, I would like to add that to the motion.
Okay, thanks, Ms. Sneddon, for that. So, Mr. Clerk, are you ready to read it back to us and take a vote?
Yes, Madam Mayor. Could I ask you to restate the addition that was just included?
That the number of workers working at the store, we had a threshold of 20, and we're changing it to 1. Mr. Kalan, did I say it well enough? How would you have phrased that?
Honorable Mayor, you said it precisely, but I would like to give our city clerk the specific reference. So the motion would be to introduce and waive for the reading of the non-emergency ordinance with a change to section 2, capital A, Arabic numeral 6.
Oh gosh, I'm sorry. Could I ask you to repeat the change to the section?
Section 2A6.
Thank you.
And the definition of covered employer will read, in part, means any retail establishment as defined below that is located in the city of Santa Barbara employs at least 1 employee in Santa Barbara and whose owner employs 300. Okay? Thank you.
And there is a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Oscar Gutierrez, seconded by Mayor Murillo, to introduce and waive further from the reading a non-emergency ordinance and a change to section 2A.6. And my apologies, I just wanted to pull up that section again.
2A6, reflecting 1 employee. I can't find it either. I'm looking at the ordinance too.
For everyone's benefit, it is on page 5 of the document labeled Council Introduction Draft, May 4th, 2021.
Mr. Kirk, I think it would suffice to say that one employee in section 2A6. And while you look at that, Ms. Sneddon, you had a comment or a question?
Yes, thank you. I wanted to confirm that this would not apply to Tri-County Produce or to a local. I am still actually quite uncomfortable not knowing which stores it applies to or doesn't apply to.
Tri-County Produce doesn't have 300 employees nationwide.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then it also applies to any retail pharmacy. And I don't think we know whether we have any local retail pharmacies or not.
It's CVS, Rite Aid, all the ones, Walgreens maybe, that has 300
It's to all of them. It's all of them, regardless of size.
Mr. Cullen?
Yes, the ordinance does apply to all retail pharmacies. That was consistent in all 30 of the examples that we saw. And so it's possible that there are local, commonly referred to as compounding pharmacies that might be covered as well.
And Mr. Kalan, you wrote it that way because it was that way in other ordinances in California?
And that was what the council directed on the 20th, as I understood it.
Really, I was thinking it was the big stores. So you can't vote for it then, Ms. Sneddon? Is that what I'm hearing?
I'm just asking questions right now, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Could help maybe a little. I can tell you for certainty that the pharmacy where you walk in to the Sansom building on Pueblo across from the hospital is a locally owned, local person owns that pharmacy. Similarly, the same with the pharmacy that's out near Goleta College, Goleta Valley Hospital. So there's also one just 5 blocks up on State Street on the left. He's definitely a formulary one. Yeah, exactly. So even when you see them in sometimes hospitals, but frequently in medical centers, they are frequently not the medical center's pharmacy. They are privately owned pharmacy doing business in that building.
Ms. Harmon might be suggesting that we exclude those. Ms. Harmon?
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I was just going to say a simple solution here, I think, could be to make drug retail pharmacies subject to the same size requirements as grocery stores. Thank you.
Thank you. That's what I was thinking the whole time. But so, Mr. Gutierrez, if you would come back, we would like to refine the motion one more time that the pharmacies are also of the larger variety with 300 employees nationwide.
Yes, I'd like to add that the pharmacies be added to the motion. Is that good enough?
Good. I think we know what you mean.
Okay.
And I will approve that as the seconder.
Madam Mayor, I know I'll have to just vote. However, I'm just so concerned that there is something in 1 week of looking at this that there's a store that's somehow falling into this that we don't know. And if we have any store closures and then people lose their jobs as a result, I just, I'm not sure understand the consequences of what this might be, but I'll leave it at that.
We would respect your vote, Ms. Snedden, however you end up voting. Mr. Kalan, a comment?
Yeah, I think I've injected some confusion unnecessarily. I want to correct myself. While it's true that retail establishment means a retail pharmacy of any size, it would still have to be operated by a covered employer with 300 employees nationally. So I apologize for stating that incorrectly. No change is necessary to assure that retail pharmacies have at least 300 employees nationally and 1 employee locally. I apologize for the mistake.
Well, but we already clarified it in our motion. Do you think that's okay?
It's perfectly fine. It won't require a text change. However, I will clarify it in the definition of retail establishment to make sure no one else makes the same error I did.
We're grateful for your work. So is there any other questions, or we could take a vote? Mr. Stowe, we made some, if you would repeat the motion.
Certainly, Madam Mayor. We have a motion from Mayor Pro Tem Oscar Gutierrez, seconded by Mayor Murillo, to introduce and waive further reading of the non-emergency ordinance, changing Section 2, Item 6, from 2 employees to 1 employee, and an inclusion of pharmacies.
It was 20 employees to 1. You said 2.
Oh, pardon me.
We changed it from 20 to 1. That was the starting point, was 20.
Certainly.
Mr. Kalan, if you approve of that motion, we can take a roll call vote.
Your Honor, the motion that Mr. Stowe wrote tracks the language I wrote down.
Okay. We're ready for a vote then?
Oh, certainly. Councilmember Friedman is recused. Councilmember Jordan?
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Oscar Gutierrez?
Aye.
Councilmember Alejandra Gutierrez?
Aye.
Councilmember Harmon?
Yes.
Councilmember Snedden?
Yes.
Mayor Murillo?
Aye. That passes 5 to 1. And we can try a motion for an emergency ordinance. And Mr. Gutierrez, did you want to move that and see if we could get, we need 5 votes for that one. So let's take it for a spin.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to approve the emergency ordinance.
I'll second it. Any discussion to that? Mr. Clerk, it looks like we're ready for a roll call vote. Mr. Kalan. Mr. Casey.
Honorable Mayor, go
Oh,
ahead.
we have to read the whole thing.
And I assume the motion includes the same changes as Mayor Pro Tem Gutierrez offered on the non-emergency motion.
Yes, that's correct.
Well, before we have the clerk read the entire ordinance, we should do a straw poll to see if we have the 5 votes. So my colleagues, please come onto the screen and let me know. We have the non-emergency ordinance already going, so that's good. Ms. Harmon, would you
I'm a
vote
yes.
for, you're a yes for emergency? Okay. I'll put myself as a yes. Ms. Snedden, how about you?
I'll be a no.
Okay. Mr. Jordan?
I cleared that up before. I could not make the findings.
Okay, so you're a no. Thank you.
I'm a
Well,
yes.
And you're a yes. Okay, thank you. And obviously Mr. Gutierrez, but we don't have enough for 5. Okay. So we'll let that rest. We don't need to take a vote. I'm assuming it's withdrawn, Mr. Gutierrez, since we're not going to get to 5.
Yes, since we don't have the votes, I don't
Thank you.
think it's
Nope.
voted.
Okay. So we'll let that be. Mr. Kalan, do you need anything else from us at this point? Or can I go ahead and close?
Not with respect to this matter, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay. So thanks to everyone who participated in public comment. Thank you to my colleagues, to Mayor Pro Tem Gutierrez and Councilmember Harmon for bringing it. Let's close this item and take a 5-minute break before we do our last item. Meeting in recess.
Yes, item 10, request from Mayor Murillo and Councilmember Sneddon to discuss city producing State of the City as a community event.
Thank you. So when two council members bring an item, we present the item, and I'd like to thank my colleagues for considering this proposal. The annual State of the City event is the city's opportunity to connect with the public about everything related to city operations, budget and finances, services like library, parks and recreation, and updates on challenges such as the drought, addressing homelessness, efforts to support downtown vitality, and ongoing work crafting our housing policy. So over the years, the event's primary organizer has been the Chamber of Commerce, with the city producing videos and presentations by the mayor and the city administrator. City TV has been instrumental in recording the event for replay on various platforms, and city administration has helped with general event organizing, which before the pandemic included a breakfast and a mixer separate from the formal program. And I'd like to thank the Chamber of Commerce for its work over the years, the Santa Barbara Regional Chamber of yesteryear, and the newly merged South Coast Chamber that we have today. What we're proposing today for consideration of City Council and city staff is a city organized, community focused State of the City event held at a time convenient for working families. So not on a early morning weekday, but rather a weekday evening, or better, a Saturday morning or a Saturday afternoon. And the contents would be the same, updates on city operations and programs, information about tax revenue and budget challenges, but the event would be more family friendly with children's activities and Spanish interpretation. For me, the best part would be an open house format, as we described in our memo, Councilmember Sneddon and I, where council members could interact with constituents, and department heads and city staff would be available for questions from the public. So I'm envisioning a location with lots of parking, like the Carrillo Recreation Center or the Cabrillo Pavilion when it's ready for events. So again, I thank the Chamber of Commerce for their work bringing a State of the City event to the community all these years. But one thing I have to let the public know, that this new idea for a city-sponsored event came about after a discussion with the Chamber regarding sponsorships of the State of the City. And I had asked Chamber officials if they could not solicit sponsorships from companies in the oil and gas industry. And the response was that they could not honor that request. I made that request because of our legislative platform and the council's record of resolutions in recent years that are aimed at reducing our dependence on fossil fuel and actually opposing oil and gas production. Our communications with the council with the chamber were civil, and the outcome was that the chamber would continue to produce State of the City events on their own with their own sponsors, and that the city would provide them with any information they needed, including a presentation from city staff, in particular, Economic Development Manager Jason Harris. So this outcome to me is the best for everyone. I really like the idea of creating an event that connects our residents with their city government, an event engaging the community, an event where city staff and elected officials are available for socializing and answering questions. It's an opportunity for us to connect with the public personally. Finally, this new format would only happen when pandemic conditions allow. And so for this year, the State of the City would be virtual and COVID safe. So I'll turn the floor over to my colleague, Councilmember Sneddon, for her remarks. And I look forward to a discussion with our council and city staff about how this proposal might go forward. Thank you. Ms. Sneddon.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd also just like to add that I I like the idea of a community state of the city. The state of our city has to do a lot with our economics, but there are so many other factors. Our parks, public safety, how we're managing homelessness or fire issues or water issues. And the public has a lot of questions about these issues. And I really see this community event as an opportunity for constituents, for the residents of our city to come forward, ask us questions, ask department head questions, and really feel that they are a part of reflecting back the state of the city. I think there's still a very big role for our economic development plans and the financial state of the city to be participating in the Chamber of Commerce's state of the city. But I think the sponsorship question, and then also that we have really, especially I think COVID has brought this out, and disasters that we've been through. We have a lot of issues that have to do with how our city is doing, the vibrancy and the health of our city beyond the economic, which is also important as well. So I'm really in favor of this community event and having the state of our city be something that is participated in by our local residents. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Any questions from the council members about this idea that we're putting out there? Mr. Jordan?
I too like it, and I'll just tell you one thing that's just kind of weighed on me over the last year, and the numbers may be out of hand, but I think it'd also be a great idea to specifically invite all those staff members that we've missed in council chambers announcing their length of employment each start of the month. Normally, particularly the ones that have been there for decades are always there to say a few words or something. But I just think it'd be kind of cool that everybody who's kind of had their birthday over the last 12 or 14 months or however long this takes, if we made sure that they were invited to come mingle and say hello also, that would be a great thing.
I appreciate that. I think that could be worked into the event. Mr. Friedman, questions?
Thank you, Madam. Actually, I have no questions. I just want to say I'm supportive of this, and I think it's an opportunity for us to really be creative and make it more interactive with the public in a different way. So, and perhaps we might be able to host it in different areas of the city each year. So that might be something we could rotate it around the different districts. If there's opportunity to do that, we're looking for different venues to go into different parts of town. So just want to throw that out there.
I think that would be possible, and we should go to public comment. There might be a couple of speakers, but I really have to ask Mr. Casey at this point if this seems doable, Mr. Casey, if we could use a city facility, and then that way that would save us some money on putting the event together. Your thoughts?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I think everything that you and the other council members have suggested is very doable. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Stout, anyone raising their hand in GoToWebinar audience?
Yes, Madam Mayor, at this time we have one individual who'd like to comment, Katie Davis. And if anyone else would like to comment, please raise your hand in the GoToWebinar app or email us at clerk@santabarbaraca.gov. Katie Davis, I have unmuted you and you may begin your comment, please.
Okay, just unmuting myself. Hi, I'm Katie Davis. I'm chair of the Santa Barbara Sierra Club, and our executive committee is 100% supportive of this idea. I think the idea of having a more inclusive community state of the city event that covers a wide array of topics is really exciting. And I also want to point out the city of Goleta is doing something similar. I just got their invitation for May 27th, Goleta Community State of the City. It's in the evening. So it says mark your calendar for 7 p.m. on Thursday, May 27th for the Goleta Community State of the City. It says support our local restaurants by getting #Goleta to go and gather around to watch the show. The program includes an update on how our city is doing from Mayor Paula Perotti and City Manager Michelle Green, special messages from your council members, local entertainment, and a Q&A. So it's you can do a lot of more interesting and fun things. I'm really supportive. Also just want to note that the last State of the City event went out and it had like 5 different fossil fuel companies on it, and it really went around. A lot of the Climate Justice Coalition members, a lot of different local groups, and people were really upset by the association of the city and so closely with these companies that were, you know, whose interests are not necessarily aligned with this city. So I think that that is really was really an issue with the chamber's version. So yeah, so I support this and really appreciate you for bringing this proposal forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Davis. Any other speakers on this topic, Mr. Stow?
No, Madam Mayor, no, there are no additional speakers.
Okay, we'll close public comment then. Ms. Sneddon, thank you so much for bringing this forward with me. And Mr. Casey, let me know if we need to take a formal vote. I am really glad that we would be able to do something that would be responsive to the community. Sir, go ahead.
Madam Mayor, since you brought this forward as a 2-person memo, I think just a motion confirming that would be appropriate.
Okay, thank you so much.
All right, I'll bite. I'll make the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Jordan.
Second.
And a second from Ms. Sneddon. Thank you. So, Mr. Clerk, let's take a vote. And I guess the way to say it is that the motion is to have the city produce the State of the City event as a community, the State of the City as a community event.
Yes, Madam Mayor. There is a motion by Councilmember Jordan, seconded by Councilmember Sneddon, to change the State of the City to be a community event.
Sounds good.
And I will take a roll call vote. Mayor Pro Tem, oh, pardon me, Councilmember Jordan.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Oscar Gutierrez.
Aye.
Councilmember Alejandro Gutierrez.
Aye.
Councilmember Harmon.
Yes.
Councilmember Sneddon.
Yes.
Councilmember Friedman.
Yes.
Mayor Murillo.
Aye. Well, that was unanimous. I really appreciate the support of my colleagues. Thanks, Mr. Stout. The last thing on our agenda is council member assignment reports. I have some, and I'll be quick because I know it's Ms. Sneddon's birthday. Mr. Friedman, go ahead.
Just real quickly, attended the Library Advisory Board and then our commercial fishing subcommittee with Councilmember Jordan and some of the commercial fishermen met to discuss how to support them coming up.
Very good. I attended the Citizens Planning Association discussion about the RENA housing numbers. We had a representative from city planning and county planning, very interesting. I attended the retirement party for Bruce Corsaw, who had been the executive director of SEIU 620 for 20 years. Well, he was with them for 20 years and was their ED. Daryl Sheck is the new leader over there, SEIU 620. The Association of Women in Communication had their awards celebration last week, honored Barbara Ben Horan of Girls Inc. Most recently, and Luz Reyes Martin. The Hope Awards put on by the Santa Barbara Education Foundation honored Nick Rail and Craig Price. Congratulations to them. And then the SB Act Homeless Collaborative Steering Committee met. I'm the chair. We discussed a whole bunch of things. There's a lot there in those meetings. Housing retention was one of the particular focuses. And then this is interesting. CityNet in the first quarter of 2021 accomplished 21 street exits. And that was 7 street exits on the east side, 6 on State Street, and 7 on the waterfront. So grateful for the good work that CityNet does. And if there's no other reports from the council, we will adjourn until tomorrow morning at 9 when we have a budget hearing And the departments are the fire department, information technology, and the waterfront. Happy birthday, Ms. Sneddon. Meeting adjourned.